Hey, and welcome back to my 5-part series on conducting effective political investigations that can expose unfit political candidates and keep them from getting elected. Like many of you, I'm fed up with unfit political candidates getting elected to office who, intoxicated by their power and hell-bent on forcing everyone to live the way they want to live and the way they want us to live, are gutting our rights to health care, to voting, and public education, and punishing anyone who does not look like them, act like them, or believe in the things they believe in. In the first video of this 5-part series, I introduced you to the basic elements involved in conducting a political investigation, and most importantly, how to do them effectively enough to convince voters not to vote for those candidates willing to use their power to harm our communities. In the second video, we covered how to build an investigation using the different types of public records, what sources are most effective, the types of information you can find, and how to access those records. In this video, we'll discuss how to identify and interview people with relevant information about the unfit candidate and how to work with them in a way that helps them to feel comfortable enough to come forward with the information they have. In videos that follow, we'll cover how to assess the information you find, and finally how to package that information to either give to the media or bloggers and or both, or to bring directly to the voters. Hi, I'm Mike Corwin. I train democratically aligned interest groups and individuals how to reshape local elections by investigating and exposing to the voters political candidates who are unfit for office. I've been featured in Professional Investigator magazine and Politico magazine, both of whom sought me out to write articles for their readers on conducting political investigations. I started out conducting investigations to build cases for attorneys in 1988 in Los Angeles, California. In 2002, I began conducting political investigations in New Mexico, where I impacted the outcome of hundreds of races by the time I retired in 2019. I actually used this approach that I teach myself when I ran for the State House in New Mexico in 2004 and seriously outperformed and overperformed the typical results for Democrats running in the overwhelmingly Republican district where I lived. And if you're ready to get started investigating, I've got a great gift for you, my free political investigation checklist. Here you'll find the sources of information that I used to investigate and expose unfit candidates and to keep them from winning elections. To get started, just click on the link in the description below. Now, let's dig in. In the previous video, we covered some of the public record sources that are really effective for conducting political investigations. And I also mentioned that I've got my free PDF that basically breaks down an entire checklist of all of the different records that you can use when conducting an investigation. Now, based upon those sources, you want to read them not just for the fact pattern, but also to identify anyone who had involvement with the candidate. So, for example, and I mentioned this earlier, let's say you're looking at a civil lawsuit against the candidate who was filed by an ex-business partner, and that business partner accused the candidate of fraud and misrepresentation. Now, typically that involves money issues within the company. And sometimes they'll outline all of that within the lawsuit, but sometimes the facts may not be that strong within the complaint. When a complaint is filed, it just has to establish a certain amount of information to show that something has occurred and that these are the allegations. So they may not put everything into that complaint. So you want to then try to identify and follow up with and speak to and interview the person who filed that lawsuit. You may have to go through an attorney, and that's okay. You simply reach out to the attorney and say, hey, you just want to try to get in touch with that person. Or you may be able to locate contact information for that person separately, and in which case then you can go ahead and contact them directly. And what you're trying to do when you reach out to them, now you always want to be straightforward, Don't misrepresent yourself in any way, shape, or form. You've got to go straight in on this and let them know who you're researching and why you're researching. If you misrepresent yourself, it's going to blow up in your face and it's going to come right back at you, and you're going to get discredited rather than you're being able to educate the voters to why they should not vote for this unfit candidate. So make sure you go straight in. When you contact them, identify yourself and say, hey, I read the lawsuit, and there's a few things I wanted to kind of run past with you to see if I could better understand what was going on at the time. Don't say to them, hey, I just want to ask you questions. Okay, make sure that you let them know you just kind of want to run through some things with them. And then go ahead and take them through what it is you're looking for and go from there on that. Now, what are you going to talk with them about? That's actually based upon the content of whatever it is that you're looking through where you identify them. And again, also the same with like a news article, a blog post. But anybody who's had some kind of experience with this unfit candidate, we talked about how to approach them. And there's a couple things that I want you to understand in terms of mindset when you're dealing with an interview with someone. The first thing is that you need the information more than they need to give it to you. Now, there may be times where you get tips, where the campaign or your interest group or whatever it is might receive a tip about someone and that person is anxious to talk. But typically, you've got to understand that most people don't want to be involved in the political process. They hear stories about threatening phone calls and emails and people showing up at their door because they support that candidate and they're angry. So you have to kind of go about this in a way that understands that you need their help more than they need to provide that help. So you have to really talk to them in a way that reassures them and that lets them know you want to do this when it's convenient for them, not based upon your deadlines, your own schedule. Once you contact somebody, one of the very first things you need to ask them is quite simply, have I caught you at a good time? If you've caught them at a good time, great, then you'll start your interview. If you have not, then you really need to ask yourself, should I recontact this person? Now, for example, if they say something like, look, I've got to go and take my kids to a soccer game, you definitely don't want to try to do the interview. At that point, ask them, hey, I hear what you're saying. Let me know what would be a good time to reach back out to you. I obviously don't want to inconvenience you, and I know you're busy. If they give you something like, well, I got some running around to do, but they're really not specific, then you might say something more like, okay, that's great. This will just take a few moments. And then you can just kind of get started on it. But you're going to have to assess whether this person's going to want to talk to you or not, and the reasons behind it. One other thing to be aware of, and I mentioned it a little earlier, is politics now carries an element of fear of the supporters being belligerent, being aggressive, those types of things. So you really have to take that into consideration. And if somebody raises that with you, you can't promise them, oh, they'll be safe. You can't say to them, oh, don't worry about it. That doesn't happen. You have to be honest with them and say, look, we understand. You want to try to get them comfortable. I'm going to give you an example, a real life example. Some years ago, I worked on an election involving a judge to a high court. And this judge had been a police officer in another state many years ago, and for years it had been known that he had been involved in some kind of excessive force case involving a black man. He had not wanted to come forward. And I reached out to him, contacted him, and through a series of conversations with him, got him to detail his full experiences, and then over time got him to feel comfortable enough that he was actually willing to go on camera, and we interviewed him online. It became a commercial that we used, and it was quite effective. Not everybody's going to want to be involved, and keep in mind that when you're doing this process, there's still some negative connotations to doing this type of work. You might hear you're just a dirt digger or a bottom dweller, those types of things. But as long as you adhere to the truth and you document everything, you're doing a public service. And this public service matters because some of these people really should not be in office. And if nobody else is going to unearth this information, that person could very well just waltz right in there. As you do your interview, you want to take good notes. And the key to taking your notes is to document what they say in the words they use and in the phrasing that they use. Now, keep in mind, you're going to want to do a summary of this interview. Not every person is going to want to be recorded, and I have some issues about recording an interview initially. Maybe down the road you can do, or you can even do a video recording. But initially, most people are not comfortable with being recorded. They tend to focus more on the mechanics of the recording and be stilted in their conversation. So you really want to be able to get them to open up. But that means taking good notes, and you really want to aim not to bullet point what they say, but to try to capture what they say as they say it. And there's just a couple of simple tips. You can say, hey, let me back you up for a second. What you said was, and then you repeat and paraphrase back to them, which, by the way, is called reflective listening and is a really powerful tool when it comes to interviews. At the same time, you're then documenting what it was that they've told you. And as you paraphrase it back, you open the door for them to add even more detail. So it's a great approach. You do want to build a little bit of rapport with the person you're interviewing. Remember how I said earlier how through a series of conversations, don't force it. You don't have to get one and done. It's not a just the facts ma'am kind of interview. It's not Dragnet. You want to build connection with the person you're interviewing, and that can take some time. It usually involves some kind of shared circumstances, people having dogs, having kids, maybe working the same types of work, any of those things, and just being human. The best way that you can build rapport with someone is to simply be a decent person. Going back to the interviews, you really don't want to ask yes or no questions. So I read in this lawsuit that you're accusing him of X, Y, and Z. So did he do X, Y, and Z? That's not how you want to do it. You don't want yes or no answers. You want open-ended questions. Something more along the lines of, in the lawsuit you alleged X, Y, and Z. Tell me about that. And then let him do all of the talking, right? That's the key. It's not about what you have to ask. It's about what they have to provide to you. So make sure you ask open-ended questions, and as you go through the interview process, I like to think of it as a funnel. You start more broadly, and then you narrow down, narrow down, narrow down, narrow down. That's the part of the process that you'll work with within the interviews, and you're going to take good notes, be very polite, ask them when you're done with the interview, is there anything else I haven't mentioned that you think might be important to know? That's kind of like that moment in Columbo when he turns around after he's about to walk out the door and he turns around. That's the same process. Give them a chance to fill in something that you haven't asked and get that information and follow up with that information. Ask additional questions. Make sure you understand it. Get more detail. And then you always have to close out an interview by telling them how much you appreciate them taking the time to speak with you. If you think of any other questions, would it be okay to get back in contact with you? And now, a couple of things. If they're gung-ho about going forward and you feel they're credible, then maybe you can say, would it be okay that if I, mention this to a reporter and see what they say, or if I mention it to a blogger, or even if they would be willing to be identified in a mailer. Now, most people get a little skittish if they're directly involved with the campaign, so working with the media or a blogger who then does an interview and does a story on it gives them that little distance from the campaign. And it also minimizes, to a certain extent, attacks that might come from the unfit candidates' supporters. Now, if not, then you want to try to say, would you be willing to go on camera at some point if we felt that would be helpful? And don't pressure them if they say, no, I'm really not. Just say, well, would it be okay if you thought about it? And then I reach back out to you in a few days. Don't wait more than a couple of days, or maybe 3 days at most. Also, not every person that you interview is going to have additional information. So you really may not need them, but you get corroboration that you need. So if you then get attacked for putting out this information, you can say, not only do we have the documents, but we confirmed it with the original source. So that really helps buttress and keep somebody from going fake news, fake news, fake news. But if you've done your work, you can counter that argument that it's fake news. Right, so those are kind of, we're not going really in depth on here, but we're covering the basis for it. So I just wanted to make sure that you understood how to identify the person, how to reach out to that person, and how to conduct that interview. And then also how to keep them close, so to speak, so that they feel comfortable maybe going forward with it. And if you're ready to get started investigating, I've got a great gift for you, my free political investigation checklist. Here you'll find the main types of sources of information that I use to expose these unfit candidates to the public and to keep them from winning elections. To get started, just click on the link in the description below.